The first time anyone in Salem saw the creature was on a moonless October night when old man Jenkins was walking home from the town's only bar, the Rusted Nail. The darkness had seemed thicker than usual that night, the kind that swallows streetlights and turns familiar streets into unknown territories. Jenkins claimed he heard it before he saw it, a low growl that seemed to vibrate the very air around him, followed by the sound of something impossibly large padding across the asphalt. When he turned, the street light above him flickered and died, but not before illuminating, for just a heartbeat, something massive and black with eyes that glowed an unnatural crimson red, like twin embers from some infernal fire. Jenkins would later describe how he couldn't look away from those eyes, how they seemed to hold him in place, his muscles frozen as if his body no longer belonged to him. It was only when the streetlight died completely that the spell was broken. Jenkins ran the remaining 3 blocks to his house, collapsed on his porch, and suffered a stroke that left him unable to speak for the remaining 6 weeks of his life. The doctors said it was coincidence, stress and age and too much whiskey catching up with him all at once, but no one in Salem quite believed that, especially after what happened next. Salem had always been an unremarkable town, the kind of place people leave at 18 and maybe return to when they're ready to die. Population 812, 1 main street, 3 churches, a diner, a bar, a small municipal building housing both town hall and police station. Surrounding it for miles were cornfields and patches of dense woods that had somehow survived a century of farming. These were the woods where, according to local legend, a coven of witches had once practiced their dark arts, far from the prying eyes of a town that had named itself after that other Salem, perhaps in some unconscious invitation to darkness. The stories about the witches had existed for generations, told to scare children into obedience, but no one had ever really believed them until the creature began appearing. After Jenkins, the sightings came more frequently. Sarah Mills saw it crossing her backyard one night while she was washing dishes, its shoulders nearly as high as her kitchen window. She described how its eyes fixed on her, burning red like laser points in the darkness, and how she found herself walking toward her back door as if pulled by invisible strings, her hand reaching for the doorknob before her husband's voice broke whatever connection had formed between her and the beast. Dean Cooper swore it followed him for 3 miles down Highway 16 one night, matching his car's speed of 50 miles per hour with an effortless, flowing stride. He could see its eyes in his rearview mirror, twin points of hypnotic crimson that seemed to grow larger the longer he looked, until he nearly drove off the road, the creature's gaze somehow reaching into his mind and clouding his thoughts. Each description was the same, a panther, but impossibly large, at least 9 feet from nose to tail base, with a coat so black it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Those who saw its eyes never forgot them, burning red orbs that seemed to see not just the body but the soul, eyes that could hold a person in place with their gaze alone, eyes that contained intelligence, malevolence, and something ancient. The sightings always occurred on the darkest nights, when the moon was new or hidden behind thick clouds, and always brought with them a sense of dread that lingered long after the creature had vanished into the shadows. The county animal control officer, Dave Whitman, set traps in the woods where the panther was most often reported, but they were found the next day torn apart as if made of paper rather than steel. When the State Wildlife Service was called, they sent an expert who explained that no known species of panther grew to such a size, that mountain lions hadn't been seen in this part of the country for a century, and that the townspeople were likely seeing a large feral dog or perhaps a bear with a medical condition causing hair loss. He left the same day, clearly uncomfortable with the intensity of the locals' belief, and was found dead in his hotel room 60 miles away the next morning, his heart apparently having simply stopped beating midway through typing his report. The autopsy revealed nothing unusual except for a single long black hair found lodged deep in his throat, a hair that was tested and determined to belong to no known species, and the strange fact that his eyes had hemorrhaged extensively, as if he had been staring at something so intently that the blood vessels had burst. The deaths began 3 months after the first sighting. Marjorie Winters, who lived alone at the edge of town, was found in her kitchen, her body partially consumed. The official ruling was animal attack, though the police chief privately admitted he'd never seen bite marks like those before. The county coroner observed that the bites seemed to have been made by a jaw significantly larger than that of any indigenous predator. Most disturbing was the fact that there had been no signs of forced entry. All of Marjorie's doors and windows had been locked from the inside. Security footage from a camera Marjorie had installed just days before showed nothing entering the house, but did capture the final moments of her life. Marjorie staring out her kitchen window into the darkness, her expression changing from fear to a strange calm as 2 points of red light reflected in her pupils. The footage showed her calmly unlocking and opening her back door before the camera abruptly cut out. 2 weeks later, Thomas Gale vanished while walking his dog one evening. The dog returned home alone, its leash torn, whimpering and refusing to eat for days afterward. Thomas's body was never found, but his glasses were discovered at the edge of Blackwood Forest, one lens shattered, the frame bent as if crushed by enormous pressure. By the time winter arrived, Salem had changed. The streets emptied before sunset. People reinforced their doors and windows. The hardware store sold out of motion-activated lights and security cameras, though strangely, the cameras never seemed to capture anything but a blur of movement or a pair of glowing red eyes that seemed to stare directly into the lens, after which the cameras invariably malfunctioned. The local library's books on cryptozoology, the occult, and local history disappeared from the shelves, borrowed by townspeople desperate for answers. It was in one of these books, a dusty volume titled Salem's Shadows, Folklore and Legends, that Martha Denning, the high school librarian, found the first mention of the beast. According to the book, in 1887, a group of 7 women had formed a coven in Salem, practicing rituals in Blackwood Forest under the leadership of a woman named Eleanor Blackwood, a distant relation of the town's founder. The coven had allegedly attempted to summon a familiar to protect him from the growing hostility of the townspeople, but the ritual had gone wrong. Instead of a protective spirit, they had opened a doorway to somewhere else, somewhere the book described only as the dark place between worlds. Through this doorway had come a creature that Eleanor's journal described as a great cat, black as the void, with eyes like burning blood that can hold a man's soul captive with a glance. The ritual had cost the lives of 4 of the 7 witches, their bodies found hollowed out as if consumed from within. The book claimed that Eleanor had eventually bound the creature to the forest with a ritual of blood and bone, but warned that the binding was temporary, and that the creature would eventually return when the stars are right or when summoned by those with the old knowledge. The final entry in Eleanor's journal, reproduced in the book, read, "It watches from the shadows. It waits. It remembers each face that has seen it and will claim them in time. Its eyes are windows to a place no human was meant to see, and once they have captured your gaze, your fate is sealed. God forgive us for what we have brought into this world." Martha Denning brought this information to the town council, but was met with skepticism from some and fear from others. The mayor, Richard Hollis, publicly dismissed the story as superstition that was causing unnecessary panic. 3 days later, his decapitated body was found in his backyard, the head placed carefully on his porch swing, eyes wide open and fixed on his back door as if in warning. The coroner noted that the blood vessels in both eyes had burst, turning the whites crimson, matching the pattern seen in several other recent deaths. The official explanation was a homicide meant to look ritualistic, but no suspects were ever identified, and the state police detectives sent to investigate left town abruptly after one of them saw something watching him from the woods behind the mayor's house, something that moved like liquid shadow across the snow with eyes that glowed like hot coals in the darkness. As winter deepened, the deaths continued. Some were clearly animal attacks, bodies found partially eaten, huge paw prints in the snow or mud nearby. Others were more mysterious. People found dead in their homes with no marks on them but expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces and their eyes bloodied and burst. A hunter found high in a tree, his rifle bent into a circle. A group of teenagers who went into the woods on a dare and were found arranged in a perfect circle, holding hands, their eyes missing but their bodies otherwise untouched. More disturbing were the disappearances, people who simply vanished without a trace, leaving behind half-eaten meals or running cars or, in one case, a shower still running and clothes laid out on a bed. Some believed these people had simply fled town, but their families insisted they'd had no plans to leave, and their bank accounts remained untouched. Security footage from around town began to reveal a pattern. Those who disappeared were often seen standing motionless, staring into darkness, before walking slowly and deliberately out of frame, their expressions vacant except for the reflected glow of red light in their pupils. The pattern became clear to those paying attention. Anyone who saw the creature was marked. Some died within days, others lived for weeks or even months, but death always came, and it was rarely peaceful or explicable. Some died in freak accidents, car crashes on straight roads with no other vehicles involved, electrocutions from appliances that were later found to be working perfectly, falls downstairs in houses they'd lived in for decades. Others simply went to sleep and never woke up, their faces contorted in expressions suggesting their dreams had been far from peaceful. A few seemed to go mad before the end, babbling about eyes watching them from every shadow, about whispers in languages that had never existed on this earth, about feeling something ancient and hungry looking out at the world through their own eyes. Most disturbing were those who described feeling a constant pull toward the forest, a compulsion they fought with increasing difficulty as the days passed, as if the creature's gaze had established some kind of psychic tether that was slowly reeling them in. Pastor Mike from the First Methodist Church began holding prayer vigils, claiming the town was under spiritual attack. Attendance swelled, then dwindled as 3 consecutive attendees died within days of the services. The church burned to the ground in March. The fire department found no cause, but reported that the flames had been unusually dark and had seemed to move against the wind. Father Thomas at St. Mary's Catholic Church brought in an exorcist from Chicago, who spent one night in town and left at dawn, his hair turned completely white, refusing to speak about what he had seen or heard in the darkness except to say that he had looked into eyes that had seen the birth and death of worlds and that no prayer in any human language could protect against what walked in Salem. The New Life Pentecostal Church simply closed its doors, its pastor leaving town without explanation, the church building remaining empty, its windows seeming to watch the town like lidless eyes. As spring arrived, a group of townspeople, led by Deputy Sheriff Mark Collins, decided to take matters into their own hands. Armed with rifles, night vision goggles, and the kind of determination that comes from months of fear, they ventured into Blackwood Forest on a cloudy April night. Their plan was to find and kill the creature once and for all. Of the 12 who entered the forest, only Collins returned, stumbling out at dawn, his clothes torn, his rifle missing, babbling about eyes in the darkness and the sound of his companions being torn apart. When he finally became coherent, his story was no more comforting. The group had been stalked through the forest for hours, the creature picking them off one by one, toying with them like a cat with mice. He described how each member of the party would suddenly freeze, their flashlights illuminating faces gone slack and eyes reflecting crimson light that came from no apparent source. One by one, they would walk into the darkness as if called, some fighting the compulsion, others going willingly, all eventually vanishing with screams that Collins would never forget. Collins had hidden in a hollow log and watched as something with too many limbs and a body that seemed to change shape in the darkness had dragged away the screaming form of his best friend. The search party found no bodies, no blood, no sign that 11 people had ever entered the forest at all. Collins resigned from the sheriff's department that day. He was found hanging in his garage a week later, though the coroner noted privately that the angle of the rope and the lack of any chair or ladder nearby made it physically impossible for him to have hanged himself. Near his body was a note that read only, "It's in my head now. I can feel it behind my eyes, looking out. Its gaze is a hook in my soul. It's coming for all of us." By summer, Salem had become a ghost town. Half the population had fled, homes abandoned, businesses closed. Those who remained moved through their days like sleepwalkers, jumping at shadows, avoiding eye contact as if the creature might somehow look through one person's eyes and see another. Many took to wearing sunglasses even at night, believing that if they couldn't see the creature's eyes, perhaps it couldn't capture their gaze. The police force had dwindled to Sheriff Lyle Harding and a single deputy, neither of whom responded to calls after dark. The Rusted Nail stayed open, serving as a gathering place for those seeking liquid courage or simply human company against the encroaching darkness. It was there that the final chapter of Salem's nightmare began, when John Keller, drunk and defiant, declared that he was going to end the fear once and for all. Despite the protests of those present, Keller left the bar just after midnight, walked to the edge of Blackwood Forest, and shouted a challenge to the darkness. The witnesses, watching from the relative safety of the bar's parking lot, reported that the night seemed to grow suddenly deeper, the stars and distant lights blinking out as if consumed. Then 2 points of burning red light appeared in the darkness, eyes like windows into hell itself. Keller stood motionless, his body rigid as if every muscle had locked simultaneously. Then, to the horror of those watching, a smile spread slowly across his face as he began walking toward those terrible eyes, his movements jerky at first, as if fighting against some invisible force, then smoother, more resolved, like a man walking willingly to embrace a lover. He was simply gone, with no sound, no movement, just there one moment and gone the next, as if the darkness itself had reached out and taken him. The next morning, the sheriff organized one final search party. They found nothing in the forest except for a single shoe belonging to Keller and, carved into the trunk of an ancient oak, a message that looked as if it had been there for a century or more: "The door is open. It walks among you now." That night, as a summer storm rolled in and the sky turned prematurely dark, the creature was seen not skulking at the edges of town but walking boldly down Main Street, its massive form illuminated by flashes of lightning, its eyes glowing like twin pools of fresh blood. Those who saw it from behind locked doors and shuttered windows reported that it walked with an almost human gait, its head swinging from side to side as if taking in the sights of the town it had claimed. Then the power went out across Salem, plunging the town into darkness broken only by lightning flashes and the glow of emergency generators. In that darkness, residents of Salem reported hearing a sound like an enormous cat purring. The vibration of it felt through the floors of their homes. Others heard whispers in their minds, voices that spoke of ancient hungers and the taste of fear. Some claimed to see not one pair of glowing eyes in the darkness but dozens, hundreds, as if the creature had somehow multiplied or as if the darkness itself had developed eyes with which to watch its prey. Most terrifying were the reports of people seeing loved ones standing outside their homes in the rain, calling for them to open the door, their eyes reflecting that same hypnotic red glow even as their faces and voices remained heartbreakingly familiar. By morning, 17 more people had vanished from Salem, including Sheriff Harding and his deputy. On the wall of the police station, written in what was later confirmed to be Harding's blood, was a message: "It's not a panther. It never was. It wears that shape to walk among us, but it is much, much older. Its eyes are doors that open both ways. Once you've seen him, it can see through yours. God help us all." Today, Salem is officially listed as a ghost town, abandoned after what government records describe as a series of unfortunate events and economic downturn. The few structures that remain standing are slowly being reclaimed by nature, vines crawling up walls, roots cracking foundations. Blackwood Forest has expanded, trees growing with unnatural speed to swallow fields and roads that once kept it at bay. No one lives in Salem now, at least no one human. But on moonless nights, travelers on the nearby highway sometimes report seeing something moving through the ruins of the town, something large and black that moves like liquid shadow. Those who see it rarely speak of it afterward, and those who do tend to die in strange and terrible ways. Their bodies are sometimes found, partially consumed, expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces, their eyes ruptured and bloody. Others simply disappear, their cars found abandoned on the roadside, engines still running, doors hanging open as if they had stepped out into the darkness and never returned. Traffic camera footage occasionally captures the last moments of these travelers, a figure standing motionless on the roadside, staring into darkness, then the appearance of two burning red eyes that seem to grow larger and brighter until they fill the entire frame before the camera fails. And in nearby towns, on the darkest nights when clouds hide the stars and the moon is just a memory, people sometimes report seeing a large black shape slipping between houses, its eyes glowing with ancient hunger, its gaze capable of reaching into the deepest parts of the human mind and pulling forth like fish on a hook. They hang crosses and iron horseshoes over the doors, they leave bowls of milk on their porches in forgotten appeasement of creatures that predate Christianity, and they whisper to their children to be good, to stay indoors after dark, because the Panther of Salem is always watching, always hungry, and once it has seen you, once its hypnotic red gaze has met yours even for an instant, there is nowhere in this world or any other where you can hide.